When Holly Thompson returned to work just days after burying her father, she didn't expect sympathy, but she didn't expect betrayal either. Tossed aside at her most vulnerable moment, she walked away silently. What her former employers didn't know was that the quiet woman they discarded was about to become the architect of their downfall, not through revenge, but by building something stronger, steadier, and unstoppable. The morning had started like any other. I was sipping black coffee in my modest home office, my inbox open, and the familiar rhythm of emails dictating the pace of my routine. The Boise sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of gold across my desk. Outside, the river murmured in the distance, steady and constant. It reminded me of my father, always calm, always resolute. Then it happened. An email. No, subject line. Just the sender, hrsummitedge.com. I clicked it absent-mindedly, expecting it to be another compliance training update or a policy memo. Instead, it was a termination notice. No meeting, no conversation. Just a 2-paragraph dismissal, citing organizational restructuring and performance concerns. I stared at the screen, my coffee cooling beside me, the air thick with disbelief. I had led my team at Summit Edge for nearly 6 years. We were the top-performing division for 3 quarters in a row. I had sacrificed evenings, weekends, and vacations. I'd even answered a client call from my father's funeral, trying to maintain professionalism while suppressing grief. And this, a cold, impersonal email, was my thank you. For a moment, I did nothing. I couldn't. My fingers hovered above the keyboard like strangers. The walls of the room seemed to contract, the space too tight to contain my outrage and sorrow. My phone buzzed. Holly? It was Gabriella, my operations lead. Her voice was tight. Urgent. What the hell is this? Did you get terminated? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Jason just called me, she continued. And Veronica. They all got the email. They're furious. Dan didn't even warn anyone. He said it was above his pay grade. Dan Weaver, my direct superior. A man, more concerned with optics than integrity. A man who hadn't returned my calls for a week. A man who hadn't even had the spine to fire me face to face. We're not letting this slide, Gabriella said. None of us are. She hung up before I could stop her. By noon, the entire team had found out. Emails, texts, calls, even a couple of drive-by visits to check on me. I tried to keep it together. I told them to stay professional, to not jeopardize their jobs. But I knew the damage was done. The loyalty I had spent years building had cracked, splintered by the same cold blade that severed my position. I sat on the porch that evening, watching the river glide past. My father and I used to fish there, long before life became about quarterly reports and client retention metrics. He used to say, "Be like the rocks, Holly. Let the current come. Let it go. Stay steady." But steadiness felt impossible now. Next morning, Hank Morrison called. I heard, he said simply. We had met 3 years earlier at a logistics symposium in Portland. Hank was now division director at Vertex Logistics, Summit Edge's biggest competitor. I don't know how they thought they could get away with it, he continued. You're the spine of their Pacific Northwest operations. Half their client loyalty is because of you. Not enough, I said, trying to smile. It didn't reach my voice. Well, screw them, Hank said. We've been planning a new Northwest expansion. I need someone who can build a team fast, someone who knows the terrain. Come work for me. I was stunned. Hank, I just got fired. Exactly, you're free. And from what I hear, your team's not too happy either. If you want, we can talk terms today. Let me think about it. Don't take too long, he said. The river's flowing. Might be time to jump. I hung up, my mind racing. By the weekend, the fallout at Summit Edge had escalated. 7 of my former teammates submitted their resignations, all effective immediately. It was a bold, unprecedented move. On Monday morning, my phone rang. Paula McCormick, the regional manager. Technically, my boss's boss. Holly, she said, her tone carefully neutral. What can I do for you? I should ask you the same. I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team. Care to explain? I'm not sure what explanation you're looking for. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. They're all going to Vertex, where you just started as division director. I didn't reply. The silence said enough. This doesn't look coincidental. People make career choices for various reasons. Perhaps you should ask Dan why your top-performing team is leaving en masse. This is about your termination, isn't it? She sounded resigned now. I've reviewed the situation. Dan didn't consult me before letting you go. I would never have approved it. That's between you and Dan. Though I am curious why the regional manager wasn't involved in terminating a team lead, she sighed. Dan claimed it was an urgent performance issue that couldn't wait for my return from the Seattle conference. I trusted his judgment. That was a mistake. I said nothing. Silence can be as sharp as a scalpel. Look, Holly, Paula finally continued, I'm prepared to offer you your position back with a 10% raise and a formal apology. We need your expertise. The Wilson account is threatening to walk. I appreciate the offer, Paula, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. We'll match whatever they're paying, plus 15%. It's not about the money. Then what would it take? There was desperation now. A realization that the tide had turned and Summit Edge was being pulled under. It would take time travel, I said. Back to when my father died and someone at Edge showed basic human decency instead of punishing me for grieving. The line went quiet. I need to go, Paula. I start my new position today. I don't want to be late. Your non-compete, she began. Feel free to have your legal team contact mine, I replied, though they might want to review the circumstances of my termination first. I hung up. Then I drove to Vertex's offices, arriving early, heart steady. Hank met me in the lobby, beaming. We're considering all 7 of your former colleagues, he said. Thank you for giving them a fair chance, I replied. Fair chance? Holly, they're top talent. Summit Edge's mistake is our gain. And just like that, a new current had begun to carry us. We were no longer trying to swim upstream. We had found a better river. 2 days after Holly's emotionally charged call with Paula McCormick, her phone buzzed again while she was reviewing client onboarding procedures in her new office at Vertex. This time, it was Barbara Kent from Summit Edge's HR department. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, Barbara whispered, clearly calling from a private space. But Dan Weaver has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Paula has launched a full investigation into management practices, especially how bereavement and personal time off were handled. Holly blinked, leaning back in her chair. The words carried more weight than she expected. That's good to hear, she replied, her voice calm but sincere. The board of directors is involved. Now, Barbara continued, an exodus like this, losing an entire specialized team to a competitor, has raised serious concerns. They're now reviewing all terminations from the past year. By Friday of that week, Vertex had extended formal offers to all 7 of Holly's former team members. Every single one accepted. That evening, the reunited team met for dinner at a rustic downtown restaurant with exposed brick walls and the gentle hum of jazz in the background. Glasses clinked in a collective toast. To new beginnings, said Veronica, her eyes bright with relief and anticipation. And to Holly, Jason added, raising his glass higher, who showed us what real leadership looks like. Their laughter rang freely, no longer burdened by silent stress or suppressed resentment. For the first time in months, they all looked genuinely happy. The following week, Holly received a formal letter from Summit Edge. It included an official apology for her termination, acknowledging it as wrongful and offering a settlement to avoid litigation. Holly accepted, not for the money, but for the recognition. For the record, that would forever state that she had been right. That same day, Vertex secured the Wilson account. The news was met with applause in the office. The client had followed their preferred team, a sign of the trust and professionalism that Holly had fostered. It was a turning point. As weeks passed, success piled upon success. Holly's division at Vertex became a rising star, outperforming projections and attracting attention from the executive board. 3 months later, she stood at the front of Vertex's largest conference room, presenting quarterly results. Behind her, a digital slideshow displayed metrics that no one could dispute. 30% growth in division revenue, 4 major client acquisitions, including 3 former Summit Edge accounts operational efficiency, up 22% to when she finished. Hank, the CEO, leaned forward, clearly impressed. Exceptional work, Holly. You and your team have exceeded every expectation. The credit belongs to them, she said, nodding toward her team sitting in the back. They've been remarkable. After the meeting, Holly returned to her office to find the 7 of them gathered with a cake in hand. What's all this? She asked, smiling in surprise. It's been exactly 3 months since we jumped ship together, Jason said. We're celebrating our Independence Day. She laughed, genuinely moved. You're all ridiculous. But I'm happy. Veronica grinned. Seriously, Holly, everyone's thriving here. And they were. Each team member had grown professionally. They were leading projects, making decisions, and finally receiving recognition for their contributions. More importantly, they felt seen as people, not just as productivity metrics. Later that day, Holly's phone buzzed again with a news alert. Summit Edge Logistics announces restructuring amid client exodus. She turned her phone to show the group. They lost the Hernandez contract last week, Ethan said, already slicing the cake. That's 20% of their Pacific Northwest revenue. Dan's gone, Luis added, cleared out his office on Friday. Paula's trying to pick up the pieces, Gabriella muttered. Holly felt no pleasure in their downfall, only justice. Summit Edge wasn't failing because her team had left. It was failing because its leadership had created a culture that made leaving the only logical choice, where loyalty was met with exploitation and grief was punished like disobedience. Raising her water glass, Holly offered a final toast. To Summit Edge. May they learn that a company is only as strong as how it treats its people. And to Holly, Gabriella added, who showed us we deserved better. 6 months after joining Vertex, an unexpected lunch invitation appeared in Holly's inbox, from Paula McCormick. Paula had left Summit Edge and joined a management consulting firm that specialized in rebuilding organizational culture. They met at a quiet restaurant near the Boise River, a tranquil spot Holly's father had once taken her to for calm during life's turbulence. Paula looked different, softer somehow. The stress lines that had once carved deep grooves beside her eyes had faded. Thank you for meeting me, she said as they settled into a corner booth. I wanted to apologize properly, Holly nodded. You weren't directly responsible. No, Paula admitted. But I created the environment that made it possible. And after you and your team left, everything unraveled. The board brought in outside consultants to figure out what had gone wrong. Their report was not kind to us. I'm not surprised. Summit Edge is being acquired by Meridian Shipping, Paula revealed. At a fraction of what the company was once worth. They're buying the client list and the physical assets. What about Dan? Still unemployed, last I heard, she said. His reputation. Well, your story traveled fast. Holly had never publicly aired her grievances, but she hadn't hidden them either. When asked why she left, she told the truth. That was all it took. I've learned a lot from this, Paula admitted. Now, I help other companies avoid the same mistakes. As they finished their meal, Paula asked the question that had been on her mind all along. Was it worth it? Walking away quietly instead of fighting? Holly didn't answer immediately. She thought of her thriving team, of the clients who had followed them, of the culture they had created, of her father's words, sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest. Yes, she said, the results speak for themselves. They shook hands before parting. 2 women changed by their experiences, one by loss, the other by regret. 1 year to the day after Holly's termination, email, she was promoted to Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire Northwest region. Her division had become Vertex's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and the highest scoring on employee satisfaction. Each of the original 7 had been promoted as well. Jason now led his division. Veronica had revolutionized client engagement and earned national recognition. The others had taken on leadership roles and earned industry accolades. On the anniversary of her firing, Holly received a small package in the mail. Inside was her old cactus plant, slightly larger now, but still alive. A note was attached. Rescued this from your old desk. Thought you might want it back now. Barbara Kent. The note ended with a postscript. Summit Edge closes for good next week. Holly. Placed the cactus on her office windowsill where it could bask in the sun. Like her, it had been discarded but survived. And more than that, it had grown. That evening, Holly walked to the Boise River and stood at the bank where she and her father used to fish. The water flowed steadily around the rocks. You were right, Dad, she whispered. Sometimes the strongest move is staying steady and letting the current do its work. Her revenge hadn't been in destroying Summit Edge. It had been in building something better. A workplace where people mattered more than numbers, where pain wasn't punished, and where leadership empowered rather than controlled. The greatest revenge wasn't in tearing down what had hurt her, it was making sure it never happened again. 3. Months passed like the changing seasons, slow in moments but gone in a blink. It was a Friday morning, and Holly stood at the front of Vert, X's largest conference room, facing a polished mahogany table and the sharply dressed executive team seated around it. Her presentation slides displayed precise, glowing metrics. 30% growth in our division, she said, clicking through the deck. 4 major client acquisitions, 3 of them former Summit Edge clients, and a 22% improvement in operational efficiency. The executives leaned in, eyes trained on the figures. At the end of her presentation, Hank, the CEO, leaned back and offered a smile. Exceptional work, Holly. You and your team have exceeded every projection. I appreciate that, Holly said, smiling. But the credit goes to the team. Their resilience and commitment made all of this possible. After the meeting, she returned to her office, only to find her core 7 team members waiting inside. A cake sat on the table, its frosting boldly declaring, Independence Day. What's this? She asked with a laugh. It's been exactly 3 months since we jumped ship together, Jason explained. We're celebrating our freedom. You're all ridiculous, Holly replied, grinning. But happy. Veronica stepped forward. Seriously, Holly, we've all grown so much here. You gave us space, trust, and respect. Each of them had flourished. Jason now led a department. Veronica had overhauled client relations across the board. Ethan managed cross-functional teams. They had autonomy, resources, and recognition, things that had been scarce at Summit Edge. As they cut slices of cake and shared stories, Holly's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Summit Edge Logistics announces restructuring amid client exodus. She raised her phone for everyone to see. Looks like the ripple effects are still moving. They lost the Hernandez contract last week, Ethan said, mouthful of cake. That's 20% of their revenue from the Northwest. Dan's gone, Luis added. Cleared out his office on Friday. I heard Paula's trying to hold the company together with duct tape and desperation, Veronica said, but Holly didn't feel satisfaction. Only a sense of justice. Summit Edge hadn't failed because they had left. It had failed because its leadership had forgotten that businesses are built on people, not numbers. To Summit Edge, she said, raising her water glass, may they learn that a company is only as strong as how it treats its people. And to Holly, Gabriella added, her eyes shining, who taught us we deserved better? 6 months into her new role, Holly received an unexpected lunch invitation from Paula McCormick. She had left Summit Edge and joined a management consulting firm that specialized in workplace culture and leadership transformation. They met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Boise River. Paula looked different, less guarded, more human. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Paula said as they sat. I wanted to apologize properly. You weren't directly responsible, Holly said gently. No, Paula replied, but I created the environment that made it possible. After you left, everything unraveled. The board hired consultants to assess the damage. The findings weren't flattering. Holly nodded, letting her continue. Summit Edge is being acquired by Meridian Shipping. For pennies on the dollar, they're buying the client list and physical assets. The brand is finished. It wasn't surprising. Summit Edge had hemorrhaged clients and talent. What about Dan? Holly asked. Still unemployed, last I heard. His reputation? Well, let's just say your story made the rounds. Quietly, Widely, Holly hadn't spread it, but she hadn't hidden it either. When asked, she simply told the truth. "I've learned a lot," Paula continued. "Now I help other companies avoid the mistakes I made. It's ironic, but it feels right." As they finished their meal, Paula hesitated. Was it worth it? Walking away quietly instead of fighting? Holly looked out over the water, her thoughts drifting to her team, to their laughter, to the success they'd built together, to her father's lessons. "Yes," she said simply. "The results speak for themselves." 1 year after that fateful email, Holly stood once again at the riverbank where she and her father used to fish. The water flowed around the rocks, steady and enduring. Vert. X had just named her Executive Vice President of Operations for the Northwest. Her division had become the company's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and carrying the highest employee satisfaction in the entire organization. Each of her 7 team members had been promoted. Jason now led a full division. Veronica had earned national recognition for her revolutionary client engagement model. The others had similarly distinguished themselves, proving time and again that their worth had never been in question. That afternoon, she received a small package at her office. Inside was a cactus plant, her old desk companion from Summit Edge. It had grown, slightly, but noticeably. There was a note. "Rescued this from your desk. Thought you might want it back now. Summit Edge closes for good next week. Barbara Kent." She placed the cactus on her windowsill, where it could soak in the sunlight. Like her, it had survived being discarded, and it had found a better place to grow. That evening, she returned to the Boise River. The water shimmered in the golden light of sunset. She whispered to the breeze, "You were right, Dad. Sometimes you just need to stay steady and let the current do its work." Her revenge hadn't come from tearing Summit Edge down. It had come from building something better, where grieving wasn't seen as weakness, where employees were valued, and where leadership meant lifting others. The greatest revenge was not in destruction, but in making the old system irrelevant. And in that, she had succeeded.